And good evening. I'm Bonnie Hong.
And I'm Ben Hong.
And this is Norwich Confidential. So we're into 2016.
And we want to thank you for tuning in.
Yes.
One of these days we'll have some images there that will show exactly what Norwich is like. It's been such a wonderful scene this weekend with all the snow.
All the snow.
But I went to the backyard today and it's as green as can be.
It's so all green.
All the snows are gone. But interestingly also that we did go to Hartford on that in the middle of the blizzard.
Middle of the blizzard, we drove up. It wasn't, well, it was a little bad when we first started driving up.
Around Norwich area.
Yeah.
But I think the storm came in late, and coming home around 5, 6 o'clock.
4 o'clock we started.
And it was just complete whiteout. And I could not see.
Couldn't see anything.
The side of the road, so.
Well, things weren't plowed either, so.
Well, in the Hartford side, Hartford side, but around Norwich, the road was very well kept,
yeah.
well plowed. So
yep.
The Norwich Public Department, I have to congratulate for doing such a great job.
They do.
That really is, compared to other towns, that really, I think we have the best.
Well, now I have a little complaint about
yeah.
how they handled the snow downtown, but
it's always complaining.
That's another story.
Well,
so you wanted to talk about money today?
Well, we want to bring up the topic because we heard, of course, this week that former Mayor Michael Bloomberg may be running as a third-party candidate.
He may not like the Democratic
President of the United States.
Yeah, because he may not like the candidate that the people choose to run. So he's decided if the candidate he wants to have in the White House doesn't get the nomination, if she doesn't get the nomination, he's decided he's going to run.
Well,
using his own money.
And he very well can afford it, and he very well can afford to buy the entire government, I think, with his money, because
he just wants to buy the White House, Ben.
Well, he's one of the 62.
Is he really?
Yes, person who owns half of the world's wealth. So that is really interesting. And
oh my God, course, he is.
Of course, Bernie Sanders was saying, well, would you, if Bernie Sanders should win, as his 2 billionaires are trying to buy the government of the United States, and I have to prevent them from getting it. And so that's going to be quite interesting. And of course, running a campaign is going to be very expensive. But hey, what's 100 million compared to your overall wealth of 80 billion? I mean, $80 billion.
But
so,
just consider that, Ben. Even if they gave away half of their billions, and even if they were left with, if they only kept 500 million,
yeah.
Just think about this. If they only kept 500 million,
right?
How can somebody not live on $500 million? That is $1 million a year, every single year for
I think
500 years.
I think you could probably use it, Bonnie. I think $100 million a day spent for you, but probably use that up before.
It only feels that way. No, Ben, it only feels that way.
It may sound large, but it really, when it comes to spending it, it really is not much.
All right.
It's not going to go around.
It may feel like that way to you.
So in any case, Michael Bloomberg is putting in some exploratory research, and the way he does his business, he does have information, and he can get informations, and he can get all of the statistics to find out exactly what will happen should he run as a third-party candidate.
Yeah, his wealth is at 45 billion.
Right.
500 million.
Right.
That is his wealth. 45 billion.
And he's
500 million.
And he is one of the 62 persons in the world who owns more than a half of all the wealth in the entire world. So think about it.
62 people.
If there are 9 billion people, which would be around maybe 4 billion would probably be below their living wealth.
Yeah.
So that is an amazing number of billions.
And in the United States, it's something like, I guess there are about 500. It takes about 500 of those billionaires to have more wealth than more than half the population of the United States.
Well, that's
500
obviously
people.
That obviously, of course, that in the U.S. there are more middle class. Wow, that's really something that is going to change. And as a matter of fact, it's already changed. But before we move into this, so there are now 62 people who owns more than half of the entire world's wealth. Now, they used to be a big number club, and there used to be something like 10 years ago or so, there were 388 of them. So this exclusive club, which is by membership only, has slowly, gradually come down to their total number.
Well, actually, it's not quite like that. There is still those 300
well, there are
or
still
whatever,
those other, but they're no longer members of the club.
No, they are. But they make less than, I think the smallest amount on here was 15 billion.
Ah, well, that's what I'm saying.
15 billion. So though they have less than 15 billion.
Yeah, too bad they didn't make it.
They didn't make the list.
Well,
so they only have 15 billion or so.
Right. So the people, of course, are in this exclusive club of 62 people. Would be, of course, you know about Michael Bloomberg, and
I didn't realize. I didn't look at all these names.
Of course, you know Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and Zuckerberg, that's the Facebook. But lo and behold, 4 members of the Walmart family belong to this club.
4 of them.
So 4 out of the 62 billionaires are members of the
Walton family.
Walton family that controls Walmart.
And they each one individually,
Right.
has over $40 billion.
Because they are in a contest money.
Oh yeah, there was one here that only had 39,400 million.
And she has to do better.
She has to do better.
So,
that was the lowest of the 4 Waltons.
And that is the reason why they cannot afford to raise $1 of pay to their salary or give them medical care.
Or pay health care.
Right.
Or, give a livable wage. They want to make sure that they can cut their hours down so they don't have to pay.
As a matter of fact, they're closing down 262 outlets.
Are they
in
really?
the entire U.S., yes. And of course, some of those
laying off more jobs.
Some of these outlets are small, but there are some community, of course, that get affected by this because there are some very small community only have a mom and pop's stores and so on in their downtown. Right. And then one day Walmart comes in and literally put all the other businesses out.
Puts them all out of business.
Out of business. And then one day Walmart leave, and then there goes the city or the town.
There's no place to buy anything.
Right.
But this happened in a lot of communities.
It happens in
hardware stores
right.
all of a sudden go out of business.
That's right.
The all the dress stores.
Right.
The clothing, all the clothing stores go out of business.
Right, and it's the same thing as in the state of Connecticut. 40, 50 years ago when I came in, live in a small town in Meriden, and the town, I'm sure that it's probably the same as Norwich, has Main Street, and they were just busy during Christmas season, and they have all the stores there, right. Your friendly neighborhood haberdasher,
right.
and shoe stores and so on. Then one day, the mall opens up,
yep.
and the Macy Mall in Meriden, and that really
took care
of all the Main Street businesses.
Yep.
They have to close down. So what happens is that the center of town becomes pizza places now and so on. But all the other items that are being sold are all in the mall. So people will go to the mall.
Let me ask you a question. With GE moving out, we have GE now going to Boston.
Right.
On Facebook, there are a lot of comments about how, whatever benefits we gave GE when they first came here, they're blaming it all on the fact that we didn't give them better tax breaks. And I actually searched it to find out how much tax did GE actually pay. And what is amazing is that they pay very little, actually. in corporate tax, in their profit, okay? They like to say that they spend, you know, they have these incredible tax burdens, but what they're doing, I mean, we've had a business, and what they do is they take all of the payroll tax that they pay, that half of that's deducted from the employee's salary, and we simply match it as an employer. They take that full amount of tax and they add all of that up of all their employees, and they claim that, look at our tax bill. That is not their profit. That's the income tax of their payroll taxes, all of their payroll taxes.
Well, the company is putting in a gross number that they supposedly says that, well, it came from our doing business, and all of this money goes to pay taxes, whether it be the state, the city, and the federal government. But they never declare how much as a corporation
that they
pay out of their own pocket.
But when you can get those numbers generally from the IRS.
Right.
The IRS, zero from General Electric, zero. So when people are saying, you know, these corporations make billions of dollars in profit, you look at how much they take out of a state. I mean, I don't think anybody should ever get over what Pfizer did down in New London. No one should get over that. The fact that, you know, the city was ready to give them complete tax breaks. They did eminent domain to get them the property they wanted. And then they leave.
Well,
and to go to another country to set up their corporate headquarters to avoid paying any more tax in the United States, not just New London or Connecticut, but any corporate tax that they owe the federal government.
Well, these are the points that we see, and we were talking about how it affects us in Norwich, because that is exactly what Bonnie is trying to say. So let's go back to that 62 people who owns more than half of the entire world's wealth. And if you look at the names of those, quite a majority of them are, of course, U.S. citizens and Americans.
The majority definitely are from the United States, but I was very surprised. India, well, I knew there were billionaires in India, but...
well, these countries will have at least one billionaire, of course.
Mexico.
And, of course, they will have one.
China.
Yeah.
China did not have as many as I thought. I think I only found 4, maybe 5.
Well, because if their name is listed, then the government will go to the place and just take out.
No, they're part of the government.
They're part of the government. All right.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, but that's not going to stay long.
No.
So anyways, let's go back to the 62 people, and most of them are Americans, of course, and U.S. citizens, and hopefully they're paying their share of taxes, although that is a questionable debate. Now, in the U.S., the economy and the growth and the so-called American way of life used to be sustained by the middle class. Middle class do the hard work and do the work or office and so on. They get their fair share of income, and then they spend it, and they pay their fair share of taxes. And
they also create jobs.
And they also create jobs. And the middle income class Americans are defined as those that are getting a gross salary of between $46,000 to $42,000 a year to $126,000 a year. So that's kind of a gap there that says, well, if you belong to this class of wage earner, then you will be labeled as middle class earner. So anything below $42,000, if a family earns less than $42,000 a year, then they will be called, of course, the lower economic class.
But
and anything above the $250,000 would be high economic class.
Right.
Now,
but even at $50,000, they're considered lower middle class.
The middle class literally sustain the vibrancy and the economic growth of this country for years, from the end of Second World War all the way until just a few years ago, because
the
they used to be the majority. Now, the middle income class no longer owns more than half of the wealth
Nope.
of the United States. As a matter of fact, there are less numbers now of middle-class people that are earning that in this country than the lower income group. So there are more people who are earning less than $42,000 a year here than there are middle income class
So
worker. Now,
there are more people that are earning $42,000 or less than there are people earning $120,000.
that is correct. Now, there used to be the reverse, that more than 50% of people in this country were in the middle class wage earner, meaning that they earn between $42,000 to $126,000 a year, whereas those that are earning less than $42,000 a year were in the lower number. So they're not, the total number is not more than 50%,
Right.
but now it's the reverse. Now the question is, well, why is it happening like that? Don't we think that the wealth should be distributed between the middle income and the lower income group so that there will be an even number like what it used to do? Well, unfortunately, it is not happening like that, because most of the wealth generated by the middle class as well as the lower income class are being siphoned towards this handful of
The 1%,
wealthy people, the
right?
1%.
It's actually not even 1%. It's
Right.
like 0.1%.
Right.
Yeah.
So wealth is being accumulated to a minor few. And again, I was telling this way back before we even started this economic discussion, that this is just like a monopoly game. You started out with 10 players, you end up maybe 5 players, then 4 players, because every time you go onto that boardwalk, you have to pay taxes and so on, until one time there will only be 2 left, and then eventually there will only be 1 left. So the end game of monopoly is that only one person will win, and that is what is happening with the wealthy people. So all these billionaires that used to have the 388 people who used to have more than half of the world's wealth is now down to 62, and 5 years from now they'll probably be down to say 20, and
It'll only take 20.
right.
They will still be those billionaires there. There'll be
Right.
most of the billionaires are not losing any money.
Right.
I can't feel badly for the billionaires that I can't.
So anyways, let's examine how these wealthy people are able to accumulate large sum of money that they don't have to work. Well, I think Bill Gates worked very hard when he put up his Microsoft,
Right.
so on. And sometimes it's a matter of luck, but he did receive quite a handsome payment for that, and so did Zuckerberg, who put out Facebook, and so are these other people there. So they have this wealth, but once they have it in them, it will continue to grow exponentially.
For a number of reasons. One, when you put that amount of money, most of them can keep it in the Federal Reserve earning interest. Again, most people don't even understand what the Federal Reserve is. It is a private bank. It is not part of the government. It is a private bank. So they can lend money, but many of the corporations played this game during the last couple of years where they weren't creating jobs.
So let's go back to this wealthy people. How did they go from here to there, and now is now a member of the exclusive
Club.
fraternity of billionaires? So they have advantages, of course. Their rate of return for their investments are obviously very good, and not like us, that we sometimes are on the bottom level of the feeding. So we feed them, basically. So they invest the money and they get a good rate of return. Now, how are they able to retain those rate of return? By getting a better tax break.
Right.
And so they have to have a very good accountant to figure out how can we retain some of this that we earn, or well, actually their money earned, so it's their money earning something.
Right.
And that accumulates the amount of wealth that they will do. Now, not all of them are retired like Bill Gates or Zuckerberg. A lot of them are still working. They're still working, like, well, Michael's Bloomberg used to work for the city.
Yeah, he's now a mayor.
Right, well, he used to be mayor. But again, they're having wealth, accumulating wealth. But most of them are, of course, have their own business. They're CEOs of major companies, or they own a majority of a company and so on. So how are they going to retain those profit that they make? So now we're talking about, say, corporations like Pfizer, corporations like GE. And so it comes back to us in our small state of Connecticut that we have this huge national and international corporations that make such a huge income and product, and yet they end up not paying that much. And the same thing as with Microsoft and now Apple. So
Apple and Disney are now owned.
So there are things that they do that will make it attractive for them to retain their profit. And if they can buy a corporation from out of the United States in a place like maybe some Ireland or places where they have a low tax level, they can make that as their headquarters. So all profit will be written as income to that country, just like Microsoft.
Was
and
it GE? There's one of the companies that were in Connecticut. They are holding over, I forgot, $1.3 billion somewhere in Europe or someplace, offshore. It's being held offshore. And the reason they want to bring it back here is because life in the United States is much better.
Well, as long as that money is outside of the United States, they may record it as profit, but the U.S. Revenue Service cannot get tax from that because it is not in the United States. And that is the reason why Apple and Microsoft, especially if you buy Microsoft Office, you'll say, oh, I bought it, at Amazon.com. And then all of a sudden it came out, it goes to, I think, in Las Vegas first, and then it goes to the Bahamas or something like that, and then that is your bill of sale.
All right, well, let's look at what is actually happening, though. Because if you have 62 people that now own as much wealth as half of the world's population, 62 people, you have, and obviously there's another 210 or 240 more billionaires in the United States alone.
Well, 241. You have to count me in.
Yeah, please. All right. So, I mean, there are still those billionaires that are making up the other 0.1% in the United States. Okay. They're not maybe making 23 billion. I mean, when you start, people just consider for a moment that if you had 500 million and you wanted to spend $1 million a year, you would have to live to be 500 years old to spend that money. And that's only 500 million. That's just half of a billion.
But that is not what their intent.
No, it's accumulation. Money. It's because it's power.
Yeah.
Now
this
wait a minute.
Is where
let me go on to something then, because part of that power is it's not just controlling our Senate and our House. You have the Trans-Pacific Partnership is probably, that and the TISA are the two biggest threats besides global warming that we are facing right now. Think about the power that is in that amount of money. We can't even fathom this very small, you call them a fraternity, or I forgot what you called them, but this small club of billionaires. They had it on 60 Minutes where they interviewed Buffett and Bill Gates, because Bill Gates has set up a foundation for charity, is giving a lot of his billions to charity. He's done a lot when he came on and helped support a Rotary initiative that has been going on for 20 years, where Rotary has been eradicating polio all around the world. Bill Gates came up, maybe, I think it might have been 5 years ago, when he began putting his money into that and challenging Rotary to even donate more money, and he would then donate more if all of the Rotarians donated. Well, when he came on, we had already eradicated polio down to 5 countries in the entire world. There were only 5 countries that had active polio. We appreciate everything he's doing, but that was his charity. Warren Buffett talked about where he put some of his money for charity. Then they interviewed 7 more of this very elite club that are giving, they have to give at least $1 billion to charity. They can choose what they want their money to go to. And the interviewer then asked them, don't you think that's an awful lot of power that you hold? The room was dead silent. Dead silent. They looked at him, at the interviewer, and then finally Warren Buffett then said, well, we're using it for a good cause. The government wouldn't be able to do what we do. Well, you know, one of the reasons they can do it is because they haven't given their fair taxable share to the government. So yes, it's wonderful that they do that, but none of that money, none of that is reaching, it's still destroying the middle class in this country, and it is still making more of the middle class disappear to below that $42,000 level. Even in Norwich, we can go back just a couple of decades when the average income in Norwich was $90,000. That was the average income in this community. It then went down to 60. It's now, I don't know what it is now. I know that it is way below 60. So that if we have the majority of people that are making $42,000 here, I think we would be fortunate. There are obviously in every community those that are doing better than maybe 120, but that should be the norm. That's only middle class. You know, it's not like upper middle class to me would be if you're making 150,000, then you can afford to begin to afford to send your children to college. You can then afford a home. You know, but most of the people, when you're on $42,000 a year and you're still considered middle class, it's a heck of a stretch to buy a home, have a new car, and send your kids to college.
No, I think you'll just have to pay the same tax bracket as the upper level. So in any case, going back to the billionaires that we have here listed, and you know, you mentioned about, well, let's see how they can distribute the wealth. And well, one thing that you have to understand that these people and these corporations have enormous power, and it is not just because they have the money, but it is because of their influence. And that is one of the very first things that they want to accomplish or to have and to hold, and that is to have enormous influence to our government. And so that is the reason, of course, why they got into politics, why, you know, at the beginning of the election, they have a dating game, of course, that will match this billionaire to this candidate, and if the billionaire hears what he likes, then he will support that candidate. Of course, Ted Cruz and Mark Rubio's, and well, Hillary Clinton is a, you know, it's a professional out of that.
She's in
the VIP
lounge being interviewed.
Interviewed. In any case, that is what they want with the money. So if the number is 41 billion compared to 15 billion, well, the 41 billion seems to sound louder than the 15 billion. So they want to do that. They want to keep on accumulating their money so that they can say, oh, I just have to pick up the phone and I'll be able to talk to the
President of the United States
or this and this and this and that. So that is what they're trying to do. But unfortunately, like I said, they are also slowly killing themselves, because the end game of monopoly is that if the accumulation of wealth goes into this handful of people, the game is done, and therefore they're dead. So what they're doing is this: well, let us be the power in this game, but we are going to change the rule as we move along. So that's what they're trying to say.
Right, and that's actually what they're doing, because at this point, what you can see where it's going. You have a Trans-Pacific Partnership that's showing you very clearly the United States would no longer have legal sovereignty in our own country. They have their own legal system made up of their corporate lawyers. We have no recourse for that. They can, if they're poisoning the water that happens to go into my well, I have no recourse. I can't do a thing. You then get that's the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The same thing is happening for the Transatlantic Partnership. So this group is seeing themselves as accumulating all of this power against basically the BRIC, the Brazil, Russia, China. They're being isolated. But then comes the TISA. And again, I know I've said this before, so we've lost our sovereignty with our legal system, but the TISA does not have anything to do with products, has nothing to do with tariffs. The TISA is strictly for service, which means that if you, the bottom line of that agreement is that if the government has a function that can be privatized, it must be privatized. It's happening in the United States now. We see the problem with private prisons. We see what that does to the prison system, where it just prolongs the incarceration of people for they can be very minor violations. And they're making lots of money off the prison system. We see it in the military, even in 13 hours. Those were private contractors.
Yeah. Yes.
So they weren't even active military at that point. They had been. We completely trained them, right? I mean, they were trained by us. We took the responsibility for that, but then they become private contractors. And again, so you see our military becoming privatized slowly, but definitely it is being privatized. Our police departments have been militarized. Now, in that TISA, it would mean that everything that is a private, a government entity must, and if it can be privatized, it must be, which would mean no public schools, no public health, no, our post office, guaranteed in our Constitution. They're saying it must be privatized. Think about our public safety concerns. A fire department that is privatized, and you have to then pay for that service. Government's not going to pay for it. So you have a fire at your home, you're going to call a private fire department. Worse than that, you have a legal system, remember, that is being controlled by the corporations. Now, the police department in your community has been public, but now must be privatized. So you now have Blackwater doing the functions of a police department in your community. Where do you think your freedoms actually are at that point? Now, and we're not talking about just in the United States. When you look at what the scope of this is, you are actually beginning to look at what they're considering to be a new world order. That, I even hate to say it, because this has to be a fantasy. It has to be science fiction. It has to be a Hollywood movie. This can't be real. How can this be happening? It is happening.
Well, like I said, with that monopoly game, if you only have 2 or 3 people left
They have to expand the game, Ben.
They have to change the rules, and they have to
expand the players here.
Make sure that they maintain the the game, and they make sure that they win every turn that somebody. And in any case, that's what it is. So, anyways, how does it affect the common people? Well,
you mean like you and me?
Like you and I, and probably also our grandson, and of course, since we live here in the United States, a lot of things that we probably were able to afford may no longer be affordable when our grandson becomes adult themselves. And think about it, it's already happening, of course. You go to college, you come out of college with $100,000 debt. Well, think about that.
Without a job.
And without a job. And it never happened before.
Never.
Because you go to college, you were insured that immediately you got a good paying job. But now you are not.
Let me bring up, we've traveled a lot. I mean, you and I have traveled for 40 years. And we've traveled almost around the world. We've been very lucky. But most of the places we've gone have been third world countries. Or developing countries, if not third world, at least developing countries. I don't think you could classify the Philippines as a third world country, except in spots, maybe in some areas. However, when you go and you visit a country like the Philippines and you're staying at these absolutely incredible resorts, and you look out your window, maybe not to the view that someone may have if you've got the best room in the hotel. If you look out the back of the hotel, you're going to see people living in, how do you describe what they were living in?
Cardboard boxes.
Basically cardboard boxes, right near a road.
To be their walls and roofing.
And roofing, yeah. No running water, no electricity, no sanitation. And yet they will come to work at that hotel and be the busboy and be the reception staff. They absolutely are meticulous in their cleanliness, in their clothing, in their demeanor to you. They are wonderful people. Then you find out that this person that's at the bar serving you a drink, or in the store that's selling you this card for you to send home to your family, are all college educated. Every single one of them have a college education. Every one of them.
Yeah.
The biggest shock to me was that almost everyone that provided a service there was better educated, had more education than I did. And that is a real eye-opener. For that to happen in this country is what you are beginning to look at. You cannot have your children going to college if you are not making sure that they are afforded the ability to either build companies so that they're providing those kinds of jobs for not just themselves but for the other people that are graduating from college, or that the corporations that have taken advantage of every asset that this country has had to offer, including the people that have made them these billionaires, if they don't pay their fair share and keep those companies here, there has to be some kind of mechanism that does not penalize, again, the people that have done all the work. The productivity in the United States is the highest it's ever been.
Yes.
But where are the profits going?
Yeah.
Not to the people that are doing the work.
Well, it certainly is not coming back, and of course there's just a few people who's holding right now, literally the bank, of course.
Holding the bank.
And they're not letting those money out. And in the case, if you can imagine that those 62 people, if they just give, say, even 10% of their total wealth to, say, do something for the world, like environmental
they're doing
change.
It for the world, Ben.
Well,
they're doing it for the world. They're not, because they don't think, they think they are so much better than our government. They don't have to give the tax because I know how to spend my money better than the government does. I can take my company and move out. I don't have to pay these taxes. These people who have worked for me all these years, I don't have to be responsible for them. I don't have to worry about their retirement. You know, the government doesn't need my money. It can take their money. They're the ones who need all those giveaway free things. These have not been giveaway free things, folks. This has been money from your pocket.
So how does this affect us? Well, we are going to have our state senator, Miss
Kathy
Austin, to come in, and maybe we can ask her.
Well, she does have some information about a Connecticut budget she was going to talk about.
And maybe we can ask her how we can have this corporation come to our town, get a good credit, like the paper box in Sprague or Pfizer or GE, and then all of a sudden just leave. So what are we doing and what are we not doing?
One of my thoughts you have some very good thoughts also about what some of the things the state could do. But I thought, like, to me, the paper box company in Sprague was an ideal company because it was, it's not like they were just moving their entire company to, where did they move to? I don't even remember, but it was for cheaper labor. We need cardboard now more than we need plastic than ever before. So here you have skilled employees, you have a building, you have this one company that's just going to sell off, and the company that's buying it isn't going to do anything here. The penalty for that really should be, fine, we're not going to let you rape our state, so you have to forfeit the property and the equipment. You then bring the employees together and you say, okay, would you like to own this company now as an employee-owned company? Now that's real socialism.
It is.
It's not. No. It is as close as I am going to get, but it would not be owned by the state. It could be turned over to the employees themselves. These employees they were losing their jobs. They lost their livelihood. They had that skill. When Dole Pineapple did that there's an island in Hawaii called Kauai. Kauai, 90% of its population's employment was from Dole Pineapple. Dole Pineapple decided to leave Kauai. I'm not sure why. Maybe they weren't rotating the crops. Maybe I don't know. But what I thought was absolutely a waste, 90% of the population is now unemployed. You have pineapple fields that are now going to waste. And the fact that the state did nothing to intervene and say, fine, Dole, you can go. Folks, you know what you're doing here. The land is now, set up a corporation. We will grant you the land. You pay us the taxes. You keep working. And the harder you work, the more you're going to get. We have nothing to do with it other than to provide you the means to do this job.
Well, it's like the sugar cane industry in the Big Island anyway. Now, but let's go back to Connecticut. Now, a lot of people say, well, they graduate and say, well, gee, I cannot find a job or decent paying job or anything like that because there's just not many corporations that are hiring here. Of course, they go to electric boat, and so they have to be an engineer or something like that to work there. And if worse comes to worse, they may end up saying, well, gee, I'm just going to stay at the casino. At least I'll get a salary and I'll get a health care coverage and so on. So they no longer have this big corporation that are constantly producing. Now, this state, or especially this area, used to have a big cardboard companies, Robertson Paperboard and Federal Paperboard and so on.
Thermos. We had Thermos.
Yeah, and so they have those big companies, and the product it did not decline in demand. As a matter of fact, it's getting. The demand is so high. But we're getting, of course, those cardboards from China, of course.
Yeah.
And so they ship it in container ships and so on. But those are things that we should have, or we'll look at it as saying, Well, how did we mess that up? Well, I remember how it was, because I used to have patients and saying, you know something, I've been working in this company for, what, 20, 30 years, and then one day we have this load of Chinese, and then they were stationed to our station, and
I was supposed to show them what my job was?
We were supposed to teach them how to operate this machine. And after about 30 days and so on, every one of them could run those machines. All of a sudden, the company just pack up those machines, send them to China, and these guys are left without a job. And so that was the story at that time, and I remember that very clearly. Why cannot we have another paperboard company here and compete, you know, get those going? Well, it needs a big, obviously, capital and so on. But we're no longer in that manufacturing mentality.
But that's then that part of the reason is that, okay, because their cost of producing that was cheaper, but then they have the cost of shipping everything back here. So the cost to us as a consumer is only a few dollars, actually less, than if it was produced down the street.
Right.
So, but because there's that $2 difference, do you remember all of the ads that used to be on TV? Made in America, you know, buy USA. It's because it's produced here. Those unions that were putting those ads on early on recognized exactly what was happening. They saw the jobs going. They saw it, like the velvet factory that was here in Norwich. None of this was all that long ago. This was not that long ago.
Well, I do have a solution for that, and the Europeans have already had done that long time ago. It's called value-added tax, VAT. So anytime you bring in goods into this country, tack on a value. So the cost difference will become even.
They're going to have to get rid of that with the TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade Initiative, Partnership, whatever, because they will no longer be able to do that. That's correct. Part of...
So the question basically is, when we go back to TTP, so we have the United States, we have Australia, we have New Zealand, and then we have Vietnam. Thailand.
Where's the one where all the trafficking, children trafficking comes from? Because they were put on, they were made it. So we took them off the child trafficking.
So we want to be equal partners with them? Well, what do they have to bring into the table?
Exactly.
Well, it's very simple, you know. The United States, Australia, New Zealand, they will send their factories into Vietnam, and they get labor that's worth only maybe less than $1 a day. And where does this product goes to? The consumer. Oh, of course, United States.
United States, Australia, New Zealand.
So we need that country that will provide us with cheap labor. And that is what this whole thing is all about.
If we stop.
So anyways.
But part of the reason why we gravitate toward that merchandise, because it is cheaper. You have to understand, we're not making $90,000 a year on average. We're making $30,000 or $40,000 a year on average now, so that you have to make up that difference in what your income is with what you are spending. So Walmart loves it because people can keep flocking to Walmart because at least you can afford something. You know, I'd rather go to Benny's, you know, I mean, I will surprisingly find more made in America products at Benny's than I will at Walmart's.
Well, in any case, so our middle class is getting smaller. Our less than middle class are getting bigger. So we will probably end up with basically less productivity, less manufacturing, less innovations, and the rest are going to be transported outside of the United States, and they're big corporations, and the big corporations basically keep their money outside of the IRS's hand. So that makes it basically difficult for the middle class to keep on growing, so they keep on being siphoned off. And of course, the biggest issue, of course, is the influence of the wealthy among our government. Yeah. So we have people that will run for president of the United States, and they will say, "Oh, I'm going to ask this for as my donor," and so on, and of course, but there is no such thing as a free ride.
No, they all
there's no
expect
Santa
something.
Claus, and you know,
you're obligated to them.
Yeah, you're obligated to them.
One of the articles that I pulled out here was the Secretary of State at one point actually made these comments about the Council on Foreign Relations actually controls Washington. But the article, to me, what was upsetting about this was what they're talking about, again, is a global agenda. They're not talking about foreign relations in how it just affects the United States. What they're trying to do is expand it so that the U.S. agenda is a global agenda. Once you have this global agenda, again, this is not by vote. This is not by the decision of the people in the United States, the average people in the United States. Let me tell you, most people around the world, if you watch some of the alternative news programs, real news programs, you will have seen German citizens uprising. You would have seen citizens in Britain uprising, in France. The protests that have been going on in Japan, the protests that have been going on in these countries over these trade agreements and these policies where they have the New World Order, and they're actually talking about the New World Order. They're deciding who our governments will be, how the governments will be run, and it's the corporations that are making these decisions. It is not the people of the countries that are involved.
Well, they will be surprised for the simple reason is that it's not as clear as like that when they wake up one morning
and find that we have a different political system because we've just had a political revolution.
That's right.
We're hoping. We are actually out of time, yeah. But Senator Austin will be here on our set live on February 17th. So if you have questions for Kathy Austin, please be sure to tune in.
And that is how the economy affects our state.
Yes.
And how the state economy affects our city. And so we have a strong or a big fight ahead of us because the state is having less and less
The state has
revenue.
a problem, but both of us have some ideas about maybe what
right.
we would love to explore some
discuss
ideas.
That with our state senator
yes.
Olson when she comes.
We do want to thank Greg because he's doing this single-handedly tonight in the booth. Our other tech, Mike, is having driver's ed.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
he'll be back in a few weeks. We will not be here live next week, February 3rd. The studio is closed. If that changes, I will send out an email, or you can find us on Facebook. So
or you could just tune in.
just tune in. Yes. Thank you.
Good night.
Oh, that's right. I'll have a video here for you. Good night. We'll see you next week.